It's spring week 2 in Apothecaria, and on this rest episode, my witch, Mistress Sweetwater, has a madcap adventure. Hey there, welcome to Drawing Expressions. I'm Parz. For the past few videos, I've been doing a series on my episodic writing, creative writing project, which is using Apothecaria, the journaling solo RPG, the JSRPG, as a basis for doing episodic writing. So yeah, here we are in this next episode. This is the first rest period where we're not doing nuts and bolts. So the last video, we did the first potion cure that was without the nuts and bolts involved. So this is going to be the first rest period where we're not doing nuts and bolts as well. We're just going to kind of dive right into how I put things together, and then we're going to talk about the story. So actually here, let me just get us right into the first thing, guidelines. Okay, so guidelines bend, including the guideline that says that I'm supposed to do this before I start talking about what I'm going to be doing in the video. It's a guideline. Yeah. So the planner and the pantser sections. So the planner section is going to be much the same as it was last time, and it's going to be following along the same format as well going into the future, which is I want to talk about not just about the story itself, and I do read it, but all the things that kind of go into making it, and then a bit of a discussion afterwards about what came out of my writing process. And then the pantser section, I'm going to talk a little bit about how Alicia and I in particular are using the materials in order to meet our creative needs, to keep ourselves accountable for continuing to write. And yeah, so it's going to be a little bit of a discussion in that topic. So yeah. So before we start diving into all of the rest of the stuff, let's get our breathing and our stretching in. I'm going to invite you to take a nice deep breath in with me. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and hold. 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale. 2, 3, 4, 5, and hold. 2, 3, 4, 5. Deep breath in. And a little bit of a stretch. And there we go. Excellent. Okay. Now, when you do your breathe and stretch, remember that the more you breathe and stretch before you sit down to write, you're going to be programming your mind to know that, hey, I'm getting ready to listen to story. I'm getting ready to think about story. I'm getting ready to write down story. So that will help you, your mind and your body settle in and do your creative writing. Okay. Let's talk about the prompts for the rest period. So this is a rest period, and so with a rest period, we get a default of 6 actions. And so just go ahead and take a screenshot of what you see up here, and just take a second. I'll take a sip of this. Okay, perfect. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about a couple of highlights on those things, because a lot of that's going to be self-explanatory. So yeah, refer to your screenshot as I go through it. So the first thing is you, on your rest period, you have a default of 6 actions. Thing is that when we were going through and we were figuring out what we were going to do for the 6 actions, we weren't quite so careful. That's the word, careful in making sure that our actions were only limited to 6. That we were doing harvesting of things and we weren't counting them because we didn't think they counted, and blah, 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 blah. We've taken, I think I counted, and it's like extra 2 or 3, which really means that we collected 2 or 3 more reagents than we should have been able to otherwise. So in terms of our gameplay, coming up with story, it's not that big of a deal, because all we're doing is collecting more stuff than we should have. And those are little notes inside the story. Our stories are much more focused now on our witches and our familiars and the territories we're exploring and the people we're encountering. The things that we're picking up in order to do potions are becoming less and less important. And we correct for our mistake later on, not like give stuff back, but we count more correctly later. But again, it's not that big a deal that's what happened. Okay, so it's the 6 actions ish. Okay, so that's one thing. So the next thing I want to talk about, too, is the Sphinx. So we have a Sphinx who shows up in the story. Sphinx is a prompt. So a Sphinx, traditionally, first off, there's only one, but it'll jump up onto like a pedestal or something. It'll just make itself grand, and it asks a riddle, and you have to answer the riddle correctly in order for bad things to not happen. So in Apothecaria, if you get the riddle right, you are able to pass by. If you get the riddle wrong, you are not. Pretty innocuous. In the ancient Greek telling, if you failed to answer the riddle of the Sphinx, it ate you. You died. So getting it wrong was sort of a bad thing, like in a terminal sense. So yeah. So in this telling, I wanted to both have the ancient Greek honored, but I also wanted to honor the Blackwell games, the Apothecaria version. And so how do you do that? And so I played with that a little bit, and you're going to see that in the story. The next thing to talk about is the Lunar Tower. That's one of the 2 named places, the magical named places that we had not been to. Lunar Tower being one, Ritual Circle being the other. Now, the Ritual Circle is not available to use until you get a ritual knife or a blade. That's something that you purchase. But the Lunar Tower is available from the get-go. No special requirements, no special materials needed. But its action does bring up a topic that I have avoided up until now, and so I'm just going to walk you through it real quick, and that is foraging points. So imagine a situation where you, as a witch, are on the lookout for reagents. Of course, that's what you do, right? And you're trying to find relatively simple ones. And for some reason, the deck of cards you're pulling from, they hate you today. And so, like, your reagent is difficulty 3, which means if you draw an ace or a 2, you fail and you don't find your thing. If you find a 3 all the way up to the king, then you get your reagent, right? So there's an awful lot of opportunity to get your stuff and a very little opportunity to not. But what happens if you keep drawing 1s and 2s? Enter foraging points. So foraging points is sort of a it's a way to acknowledge you're trying really, really hard to find something that should be really, really easy, and you're failing and it's just not working. So foraging points is it's a way of kind of keeping track of your effort going into finding a particular reagent. So okay, so you have this situation. You're trying to find a thing, and I'm just going to call it thing because why not? You're trying to find thing. It's difficulty 3 in the location where you are, and you draw an ace. Okay, so what are you going to do? Well, you're probably going to want to try again, right? And so you get another ace, and then you try again, and you get like a 2. And it's okay, so each time you've missed. So the foraging points, when you start looking at foraging for any given reagent, your foraging points start at 0. And every time you fail to pick up the reagent you're looking to pick up, you get 1 foraging point. There are mechanics that change that number. The lunar tower is included in this. But we're just going to keep it to the simple case. So you start at 0. Okay, so you're looking for the thing, you draw the card, you get an ace, you don't get the reagent, so you get 1 foraging point, right? So 0 plus 1 is 1. So now you have 1 foraging point. As soon as the foraging points equal the difficulty of the thing you're looking for, you get that thing for free. So you tried the once, you got the ace, you have 1 foraging point. You draw again, you get another ace, now you've got 2 foraging points. And you try a third time, now this time you got the 2, it's still not equal, right? So now you're at 3 foraging points. So now you're at 3 foraging points, you're at the difficulty is 3, the 2 equal, so now you can pick that thing up for free. And that's really what it's there for. It's basically to keep you from ripping your hair out, as little as you may have left, and causing yourself grief and stress over trying to find something that should be, again, really, really simple to do. Okay, so that is foraging points. Okay, now in the lunar tower, the way it works is you can go to the lunar tower, and so it takes you an action to get there, right? So you're investing a little bit of action points in order to get a benefit on your foraging points. So you draw a card, and then you divide by 2, and that is the number of foraging points you start with. Okay, so basically you're trying to find something for free with no risk, right? So if you go to the lunar tower and you draw a 10, you divide by 2, that's 5. That's 5 foraging points. So anything that's 5 difficulty or less, you're going to get for free on your first go around. All right, so that can be a really good investment. If, however, you get the ace that you keep seeming to draw every time you're trying to find this really simple thing, well, 1 divided by 2 is a half. Ugh, not good. So it doesn't always pan out. The one thing I would say is because you'll get fractions because you're dividing by 2, and if you divide by divide an odd number by 2, you're going to get a fraction. Round up. At the very least, do yourself that little bit of a favor, because if you get a 3, for instance, right, and you round down, you just sort of drop the half. So 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. If you drop the 0.5, now you're at 1, which is a guaranteed pickup. Anyway, anywhere, right? Difficulty 1 just means I look at it, it's right there, I pick it up. So at the very least, round up, so that if you draw 3, you divide by 2, you get 1.5, round it up to 2. Now at least, if it's a 1 or a 2, you pick it up. It's not quite so, ugh. Okay. So that is that. In this episode, we buy a hive. Why do we buy a hive? Well, because it would be nice to have something on the property. Nice to have something that provides a bit of sweet for some potions. But for the most part, we were looking at it because it made mathematical sense. So real quick, it costs you 50 silver to get that hive, but you get 4 silver every time you put in a dose of sweet. So that, and you get 4 doses per season, so that's 16 per season. And if you've got 4 seasons, if you start doing the math, you make your money back in less than a year. So that is just good stuff right there. Lastly, the thing to note, the Cloud Isles. We're going to visit the Cloud Isles today, and they're only accessible if you can fly. And usually that is going to be if you have the ability to have a broom, which is an item that you can purchase. We don't have a broom. We got there a different way. And so we'll reveal that in the story. So now let's talk about what's been written before. And as I go through this series, this is going to become like a longer and longer and longer list. So it's not going to be exhaustive at all. I'm just going to try and pick up some highlights that that I think are important to make note of as you listen to the narrative and say, oh, okay, that's where his mind was. Okay, so what's been written before? So, 1, we now consider the cottage to be ours and consider ourselves to be witches, right? That is from the prior episode. So there's more certainty. There is more security. There is some maybe, okay, now we're starting to get some stuff going. And how might we feel about that? Might we just accept it? Do we want more? Are we embarrassed by it? Where does your mind go when a cottage has suddenly landed in your lap? Okay, so that's a thing. We've also cured 2 people now, and we've picked up a bit more money from the pixies, right? So we picked up 10 silver from them, so we've got 54 silver, I think, because of the sweet in the last potion, because you had the 4. So 54 silver in our pocket, so we can buy something inexpensive. The hive being 50 is a nice little target. Right, so we're sort of investing our 50. So, smart witch. Okay. We have talked about High Rannoch not being much of a town. It's beaten up. It's there's not a lot of people there. Everything is just kind of run down, and like the fence that goes, or other walls that go around the town are just sort of rotten boards and things. And so it's pretty much anything that we're going to be talking about the town in this next little while, it should be phrased as being run down, not taken care of. People are ignoring it. Unless you want to highlight something very, very specific because it's receiving maintenance or otherwise there's something special going on, right? And so keep in mind that if you break the pattern of how you're writing something, you are going to be calling attention to it. And if you call attention to it, readers are going to expect there's something important about it. When I say readers, you are the first reader. And so keep in mind that, weeks or months may pass before you come back and you're reading this again, maybe, hopefully. And hopefully you're going to have as much enjoyment reading it that next time as you did when you wrote it. And then you're like reminded of things that you wrote, or like, wow, I can't believe that this was written this way. Who did that? Oh, right, me. That's kind of a cool feeling when you can have that. So just because no one else is going to be reading your stuff, if that is your case, you are still going to be reading it, I hope, and will be able to enjoy it for months and years to come. Okay. The last thing that I want to talk about in the what's been written before is we've been to Glimmerwood Grove, right, the forest. We've been to Meltwater Loch, so the loch. We've been to Heroes Hollow, the dungeon. We have not been to Moonbreaker Mountain yet. And so this is an opportunity to go visit Moonbreaker Mountain, especially because in the last episode, Mr. Sweetwater, the witch, laying on the beach, watching the clouds and sort of wondering what would they be like. And maybe she can go to Moonbreaker Mountain, climb the mountain, go up into the clouds and see what's what. Because, you know, we as modern day people, we know that clouds are vapor and, you know, it's just sort of, it's like fog up in the air. But does she know that? Not really. Not really. She supposes it, but she doesn't know it. So she gets an opportunity to explore some stuff. Okay. So now let's talk about some things that came into my imagination, given that we've got these other parts that are operational. So one thing that came to mind is within games, not so much within books, but within games, if you get an ability, generally that ability is right there. Boom. And I don't know if you can hear that because the mic does like filtery things, but like snap. So is there a way to play with this notion, play with this idea that things just suddenly appear? Things just instantly happen. For instance, we get the hive. There is no time frame given for, you know, when the honey is available. It's just like it's available right then, right there. And so play with it. We're gonna play with that. And in fact, this is gonna turn into a much bigger theme going forward. And I never saw it coming. Okay. Along with this, and this is another piece that sort of marries in, and that's going to be sort of this long continuing thing that's coming up, is a feature of Southeast Asian culture is the spirit house. So if you look it up on the internet, you're going to see these little houses. Oftentimes there's like little pieces of, you know, glass or mirror or things, and, you know, it's brightly colored, and they can be, you know, very richly decorated. They can be small, they can be big. I mean, they can be tremendously huge. Sometimes they're made of wood or concrete, or, I mean, they can be amazing pieces of art. And the whole idea behind a spirit house is that it is supposed to be the home of the protective spirit of the land upon which your building is, or, you know, that it's been sort of, you know, carved out. So I live in a neighborhood, and the neighborhood has a spirit house, so it covers the entire development. And so the protective spirit of the land is honored, and there's little offerings that are given, and, you know, candles and whatnot, and people pray before them. And different cultures have different styles and things. So I wanted to bring that aspect into my story and honor the fact that here I am in Thailand, and there is this culture of spirit houses. I wanted to put that into my story. And so how can we do that? So much for that. So another thing is my witch. We know she's headstrong. I believe she's been described as having gumption. Yeah, she's quite the little force of nature. So what else might that mean? Is she opinionated? So she's coming from pretty much nothing, like a, woodcutter cabin. And now here she is. So does she have a different view of things, especially because she's been given a cottage that's in relatively good shape, and she's got this witchy practice that's starting to, really pick up, and she's starting to get reputation and whatnot. So where else does that go? The last thing I want to put into the imagination bucket is in the prompts, we know we're going to encounter a balloonist. Now, in so many movies, oftentimes you encounter the balloonist or the crazy guy. He's the crazy scientist guy who's able to, figure out how to build the airplane or the glider or whatever. How are they dressed? What are some defining features of them? Now, is it going to be incongruous with Apothecaria and potion making? Yeah, and I like it. So that is what we're going to be looking for there. Okay, so that brings us to the story itself. It is kind of a long one, so I invite you to pause, go to the bathroom, grab yourself a beverage, adult or not, as you see fit, and sit back and listen as the tale unfolds. To follow along with the narration, there will be a pinned comment in the so right below. So go ahead and click on that, and that will take you to the Blogger page where this is published. Okay. Now, if you're ready, here we go. Home. That is what I call the cottage and grounds. It had been only a week and a bit, but everything felt like it was mine. Both my property, but also my responsibility to care for, maintain, and even improve. No feelings of being a guest anymore, and certainly not of being a trespasser or interloper. Maybe I'd prove something to the house. Or maybe it was my intention to stay and care for not just the property, but for the people and creatures who might come to me for help. I had stepped fully into being the witch. There's a change in perspective when you go from being a guest to being an owner. Things that you accepted as being just the way it is turns into things you can change. But I also wanted to start small. Allowing my thoughts to imagine changes throughout the grounds was just too much to consider all at once. The cottage needed a deep clean, the garden beds needed clearing of brambles, places where there had been additions and outbuildings needed rejuvenation. There was a lot that an owner should want to fix and improve. Getting back to small starts, I decided that the first thing that needed doing was planting something in the one cleared garden plot. Everything else could wait. But what to plant? In the old witch's notes, it said I could plant anything in it and it'd be a happy and healthy plant, which is why I laid out my existing ingredients to see what would best go in the ground. I had quite the assortment. From Glimmerwood Grove, wild rose, coffee cap, songberries. From Meltwater Loch, deep reed, gas reed, and this of course ignores the animal and magic reagents. Each of them had good reasons to be in the ground, but I finally decided on wild rose, although I almost planted songberries, and then I realized I might be inviting fairies, drunk or otherwise, to sing near the cottage at all hours. Wild rose is pretty, smells nice, and is a potent reagent that helps bone and skin ailments. It was so easy to plant, but the thing that caught my attention was how it so quickly sprang to life. This place is bound to be full of surprises. Along with the surprises that I'd already seen, there's another one that I feel. It's not something that I can explain well, but I feel like I'm a part of something bigger. Something more than this small house, more than the surrounding grounds. It's as if I've become a part of the land. In a way, I'm an owner, but in another way, I'm a working part of it all. Like I said, it's hard to describe, but something I did in honor of that feeling was to set up a small... It's not a house, and certainly not an altar or anything religious, but it's a space on the mantelpiece that somehow symbolizes that belonging feeling. Right now, there's a small bowl of water, but I intend to add to it as the feeling prompts me. And it's here that I stand and reach out with my feelings to let the land know I'm heading out and ask that I travel safely. Which is when Mouse Eye peered out from behind the bowl, yawning. "Where are we headed?" How he ended up behind the bowl in the first place is another mystery, but one that will stay mysterious. I don't feel like trying to quiz my never forthcoming familiar. Instead, I opted to keep my day moving forward. We're going to town. I feel like getting something, I just don't know what yet. Besides that, I knew I also wanted to do a bit of reagent gathering. There is nothing so motivating as preparing healing potions and helping people, including all the work needed to make it happen. Mouse Eye and I didn't talk much as we walked. My imagination was fully invested in the possibilities. I did remember all the bits that Bob dragged out for me, but over the course of those couple of hours during my last visit, I knew there were a couple of possibilities that I can now afford. Bob was as helpful and friendly as he was last time. After a brief discussion, I bought my first home improvement, a hive. I bought a house for bees. Now, it did seem a bit lacking in that the bees didn't actually come with the hive. He doesn't sell swarms, or queens for that matter, but at least a house is a start. And maybe I was being a bit silly with my money, which mostly became Bob's money, what with paying for the hive. But I felt proud of making my first, and I know for a certainty, not my last purchase. After my purchase, I stood outside the shop feeling a mix of pride, holding on to my new purchase, and foolishness for holding an empty bee house. I decided to visit a couple of places I hadn't visited yet, the Lunar Tower and the Ritual Circle. They're located near each other, a few minutes' walk outside the town proper. Off I went with the paper and wire hive banging against my leg. The walk is a pleasant one. The town itself sits on top of a small hill. The path to the tower and circle descends gently through some woods to a clearing. Small wildflowers bloom along the path borders. The clearing itself is relatively small. There isn't much more than the circle and the tower. And I should note that neither appeared all that impressive. The circle was little more than a small labyrinth with a table made of rock at the center. Before anyone could use this for anything, you'd need a good clearing of weeds and wind-blown debris. And the Lunar Tower looked, how can I say this? Like a tall outhouse. Lunar, I think, refers to the crescent moon carved in the door. But instead of being a place to relieve yourself, there's just a creaky staircase up to a second level where there's another rocky table. I figured, since I was here and I already knew I was going to forage for reagents, that I'd use the towers' power to attune my foraging equipment, the small bit I have. Maybe it would help me in my harvesting. I felt something happen, but I'm not sure what exactly. Through all this, I'd left the hive at the path's entrance. I figured there was no sense in lugging it around and banging it against myself, perhaps even damaging it. I wandered back to the path's mouth, thinking about the sorry state of everything I'd seen and experienced. Yes, I was very recently from the woods in a small woodcutter's cabin. At least it was in good repair, as is my new cottage. But the town of High Rannoch, far from it resembling its lofty name, was a small, ill-kept, rotting timber-wrapped mess. How I'd become so judgmental, I don't know, but that was how I felt. How else to think of a town that treated a place of power like a place where one leaves their business? Incredible. And as is my wont, I was grumbling about the town and making vows to remake things in a better way and making a list of priorities. And that's when I got back to the hive. And Mouse Eye, who appeared to be deep in conversation with someone. It turns out I was mistaken. It was someone's. About a half-dozen bees were walking on, crawling through and flying around the hive. Mouse Eye asked me to sit beside him so that we could all be at the same level during our negotiations. "What negotiations?" I asked. "Rental occupancy," replied Mouse Eye. I felt lost. Mouse Eye uncharacteristically explained, "These ladies are looking for a new hive for a new queen and her small brood. And they like the hive floor plan. I was just explaining that the hive will be located at our cottage. They know the area and approve. They'll even transport the hive to an appropriate location there. The only question is how much rent we're asking for." Rent? I hadn't thought any of this through. I'd figured bees would simply move in and that would be that. Rent? I was at a loss. So I decided to let Mouse-Eye continue dealing with the bees, which was just as well. It was all buzzes, squeaks, and sounds that I can't describe at all. None of the sounds were anything I could understand. Eventually, Mouse-Eye said, "With your okay, they'll remit honey 4 times per season. Does that sound okay to you?" I found myself doing some quick math. If I could get 4 silver for a sweet potion, like what Madame Hightower had paid, I'd make back my 50 silver in less than a year. 4 silver per sweet times 4 sweet per season times 4 seasons per year is 64 silver per year. I eagerly nodded. "Good, then we're all agreed." Mouse-Eye squeaked a last squeak or two, the bees buzzed in response, and the deal was done. I just looked at Mouse-Eye in amazement. I was flabbergasted. I was deeply appreciative that the hive was going to be used by agreeable bees. "Mouse-Eye, you speak bee?" No." "The bees speak mouse?"
No."
"Then how?"
"We just, understood each other. It's hard to explain, but it all worked out."
And then he changed the subject.
"So, where are we off to now?"
With no hive to lug around, the number of places we could go to just opened up. I'd feared my purchase was going to force a return to the cottage. But now, it was time to visit some place new. Moonbreaker Mountain. I quietly hoped the moon part of the mountain didn't refer to another outhouse-type setup. While I could have asked Mouse-Eye to check ahead and see if everything was safe, I decided instead to have us travel together and experience what might come jointly. I must admit that part of my thinking was centered on how useful Mouse-Eye had been with the bees. With his typical non-answer, I still didn't know or even suspect an answer as to how they not only conversed, but negotiated. It was something special, something mysterious, and something I desperately wanted to know how to do. We traveled in silence, comfortably. I was lost in my thoughts, per usual, wondering not only about the bees, but also that sense of belonging at the cottage. It was also a comfortable feeling, a warm, safe feeling, acceptance. I think that was it in a nutshell. It felt good. Also, as usual, I didn't spot the unusual, colorful thing rising above the trees. But then again, I'd been trying to focus my attention on where I was walking. Looking up, that had been less important. I'd never seen anything like it. It was a balloon. Huge stripes of colorful fabric stitched together, bobbing and swaying, but not rising. While it was Mouse-Eye who called attention to it, it was me that suggested we go check it out. We climbed a knoll and came face to face with the whole scene. The balloon trying to rise, lines lashed to 3 trees keeping it held in place, a wicker basket lashed underneath the balloon, and a strange man wearing a leather hat snugly over his head, complete with goggles, muttering / saying / yelling to himself over and over again in different volumes, "Yes, but that won't work." As he made to go to another of the trees around which rope was tied, he looked over and spotted me. Quite unexpectedly and to my utter surprise, he began to hoop and gallivant around, shouting things like, "Yes!" and "Saved!" and other such. His enthusiasm, far from reassuring me, had me wondering just what was going on. He began to gesticulate to me, wanting me to approach. And so I did so, albeit cautiously. He began speaking to me. "Please do pardon. I'm afraid I haven't been properly social. Madcap, they call me. Madcap Matt, but Madcap will do. I'm so glad you've come. I'm in need of some help, and I bet you're in want of some adventure." Given that I could think of better things to do than gather reagents simply to store them, rather than getting them while I was actually planning a potion, I was already half convinced to say yes to whatever it was he was going to suggest. I see in your face you have questions. The help I require is to have the ropes untied from the trees while I'm ready to float away in the basket. I'd had help here, but they left. Apparently, the patients needed to fill the balloon with hot air wasn't present. So they left and left me with no way to safely set this glorious balloon free and make sure I went with it. And the adventure is for you to join me, and I'll do you one better. I'll take you to wherever you'd like to go. What do you think? I was happy to help release the balloon, and I was so tempted to float up into the air. I thought about lying on the meltwater lock beach, watching the clouds go by. So I asked to float up to the clouds. Young miss, your wish is Madcap's command, and I'll do you one better. I'll take you on a tour of the Cloud Isles. The Cloud Isles? I'd seen a mention or two in the old witch's notes, but hadn't really paid much attention to those entries. Flying was a requirement, and since I hadn't been graced with that ability, or even a pair of useless but lovely wings, Madcap got himself an eager helper. That was until it was time to actually help. He tied a rope around me, over the shoulders and through my legs. Not comfortable, but very temporary. I undid the 3 lines from the trees and then ran towards the now rising balloon. Madcap hauled me up easily. After disentangling from my makeshift harness, we watched the ground recede from us as we rose further and further into the sky. What a joy birds experience! It was beyond description. I swear I'll never forget the sensations, the sights, and, to Madcap's credit, he held off on being a tour guide until after the initial amazement had worn off. Slightly. It's beautiful up here, isn't it? And so peaceful. I can steer the airship in a way, but the most important part is reading the wind currents, and of course knowing the lay of things. Speaking of, I don't believe we've properly met yet. As I said, you can call me Madcap. They call me that because that's how people feel about my love of flying. So what may I call you? Mistress Sweetwater. He closed his eyes for a minute as if he were searching inside his head for something. I don't recall hearing that name. Whereabouts do you live? Outside High Rannoch. I'm the new witch. Aha! Are you now? How exciting! I live in the other direction, but I come to Moonbreaker because it's the best place to launch from. I'll travel back and forth while the weather's good, and spring is known for her fresh winds and, quite frankly, perfect flying conditions. We continued to chat and look and be awestruck. I never get tired of the view, he said somewhat distantly. I think he was just lost in the view. After a while, he pointed out bits of land floating in the air. It was so odd seeing what appeared to be islands, but coming up at them. Here we are, the Cloud Isles! As impressive as the land below, receding had been, it didn't hold a candle to land seemingly floating on clouds. I had no words. In fact, I still don't. Small islands, big islands, rocky islands, forested islands, flat islands, hilly islands, an island with help written out in rocks. Islands with... Wait. Help? Madcap, do you see that? He looked where I was pointing, and then he looked at me. Ah, that. You can't be too careful up here. That could be a trick. Pirates will do sneaky things like that to rope in the unwary. Thankfully, I'm wary. So let's head off that-a-way. He pointed directly opposite to where the rocky appeal for aid was. Hello, Sook Sook. Yeah. Yeah, Sook Sook. Yeah, Sook Sook. Yeah, Sook Sook. Yeah. Yeah. This, everybody, is, whoops, here we go. This is Suki, Sukasha. Okay, down you go. If you heard her meowing, it's her. Okay, back to the story. But what if that's someone genuinely in need? Then someone will come along to help. I paused, then what if that someone is me? He paused, then, well, I pressed. You did say my wish is your command. I was afraid I'd pushed too hard, but he just smiled in acquiescence. You are entirely right. Your wish is indeed my command. I'll get us over there, but let's approach cautiously. I looked quickly for Mouse-Eye to see if he could make sure things were safe, but he was nowhere to be found. As we got closer to the island, Madcap yelled out, "Ahoy the island! Ahoy the cry for help!" A minute later, a figure staggered out from the woods bordering the rocky plea. "Well, I'll be a nightingale's wart. That's old Sebastian Kittington. How in the blazes did he end up here?" To me, he said, "Hang on, we're going in for a landing." A minute later, we sat down gently on top of the help sign, and seconds after that, Sebastian ran up to the basket. "Saints preserve you, Madcap! Thank goodness you're here! I wasn't sure how much longer I could have held out." Madcap made no move to get out of the basket, nor to invite the stranded man in. "Sebastian, you old charlatan, what are you doing up here? Aside from hiding, of course." I could see the story quickly being rehearsed, and then we got to hear the performance. "Well, as to how I got here, I did a bit of business with a traveling merchant. Next thing I know, I found myself here." Madcap just crossed his arms in disbelief. "A bit of business? What'd you try to steal?" Sebastian's eyes widened. "Nothing, I swear." Madcap said nothing. He just stared. I felt the need to speak up, having brought this about. "I'm sorry, but can someone tell me what's going on?" Madcap spoke first. "This man is a con, a thief, a gambler, a drunk, and overall a ne'er-do-well. He owes a lot of people a lot of money, and he's been missing for weeks." I just stood there thinking, then, "Well, does he owe you money?" Madcap nodded. 5 silver. Sebastian started. "Look, Madcap, I told you that I'd cover the bill that day, but I didn't currently have my money with me. I'm good for it. Just get me down to some proper ground, and I swear I'll pay you what you're owed." I stared at the two of them. "There's hard feelings over 5 silver. Really." Sebastian grabbed a hold of that. "You hear her, Madcap? She's talking sense. 5 silver, a pittance, really. Come on, let me off this rock and I'll pay you what's due." Madcap held up his hand. "So how did you end up here again? Who was that merchant?" Sebastian sighed loudly. "Okay, so how was I supposed to know he was a wizard with the ability to relocate someone to a place such as this?" Madcap started to laugh. "Now that's closer to the truth. Fine, climb aboard." Sebastian made as if to run, but then Madcap held up his hand. "But first, you will show my passenger, the new Witch of High Rannoch, a brief tour of what must now be a fully explored island, and since I know you know a bit about things of value, including such things as grow in the ground, you'll help her gather a few things." And then he turned to me. "Assuming that's to your liking, Mistress Sweetwater." I was thrilled. Walking around on a floating island, being directed here and there, courteously but quickly, by my guide, was awesome. We gathered moon lotus flower pods. They'd closed up as protection against the sun's rays, but the pollen inside was valuable. Inside Sebastian's camp, I grabbed some nimbus fish scales. They, along with the leftover bones, were all that was left of one of the few things Sebastian had available to eat. I think I heard him say that he'll never eat another fish ever again. Willingly, at least. But the real find was realizing that Sebastian had used star shards within his help sign. Not only were they powerful reagents, but by placing one on my mantelpiece, it'd be another subtle sign to anyone coming to the cottage that I was a witch. Once everything had been gathered and Sebastian had the few things of value he'd collected with him, we went to the balloon. And before Sebastian boarded, he reached into his pocket and pulled out 5 silver. "I managed to find a coin here and there up here. Here's what I owe you. I'm grateful to be leaving this place." Madcap held the money for a moment, then turned to me. I'd have left him had I been here solo, and I nearly did despite you being here. This, I believe, should rightfully be yours. Shocked, I tried to decline, but he insisted. Thank you, Madcap, was all I could think to say. We clambered in, then Sebastian laughed, slapped his hands together, then said, I'm so glad we're all happy. Now, can we make our way away from here? As we floated down back towards Moonbreaker Mountain, things were awkwardly silent. I think Sebastian in particular was formulating next steps, and not necessarily ones that would lead to better judgment or behaviors. You're a witch, eh? On the lookout for an apprentice? It felt like he was hunting for a safe haven, who would seek to collect a debt against a witch or her retinue. Not at this time. Thank you, however, for your interest in working for me. Figured as much, but I had to ask. Madcap softly glowered. Sebastian noticed. Hey, no, I'm not looking to welch. I'm good for all of it. I had to ask, how much do you owe? I figured if his debt to Madcap was only 5 silver, how much could the total debt be? Sebastian started to hum and haw, followed by Madcap chiming in. It has to be a few thousand, and most of that is to far more powerful people than I'd ever want to mess with. That was... wow. Several thousand? It was possible to get into debt that deep? Wow. Sebastian just shrugged. I had a bit of bad luck and a couple of business deals that didn't pan out. What will you do? I just had to know. He shrugged again. I'm thinking I could try to make good by giving my original plan another go. Madcap jumped in. Or, instead of trying to rob well-guarded houses, you could become a farmer. Show people you're willing to make coin with good, honest work. You'll eventually be forgiven. Sebastian looked like it had just been suggested that he collect night soil. A farmer? No, gods no. Maybe I'll acquire some stock and open a shop. That sounded promising to me. You know your reagents, maybe you can gather them. We all discussed it with various levels of enthusiasm until Madcap got us safely on the ground. I prepared to head back home, but Madcap stopped me first. Many thanks, mistress. I'll happily fly with you again any day, any time. Head off now. I'll make sure to direct Sebastian towards his home and away from you. He's not a violent man, but my heart will feel better with distance between your good self and that fraud. I thanked him back and headed off. A few minutes later, I felt Mouseye on my shoulder. I'm looking backward. No sign of anyone following us. How did he know to watch for anyone? Hasn't he been nowhere to be found for the entire balloon trip? I asked. Sorry, I'm kind of shy. It's fine being with you, but I don't like people looking at me. Besides, it helps me watch better. So, were you with me the entire time? Yeah, pretty much. So not all the time, eh? Where else did you go? He shrugged. Oh, nowhere in particular. I sighed. A straight answer was too much to work for and too hard to drag out of him. It had been a great day, and I didn't want to spoil it. I let that secret remain so. On our way home, I thought about the balloon and the amazing flight. What adventures Madcap must experience. I certainly hope to have another one sometime soon. I began to hum a tuneless tune, a little bit of random melody that seemed to fit the surroundings, light, airy, happy. I even skipped in time. The trail went down into a narrow valley. I could reach out and touch both sides. The walls of what quickly became a small canyon rose above me. Up ahead was a block of rock in the middle of the path. And as I approached, a human-headed, lion-bodied creature jumped onto the rock and watched me approach. All I could think was, what now? A few paces shy of the makeshift pedestal, the creature spoke. Hold, traveler. I am a sphinx. According to ancient law, you must answer a riddle. Successfully answer, and you may pass. Fail, and pay the penalty. I wasn't amused. Look, I'm tired. I'm just looking to go home and settle in. No matter. You have approached, and so now you must answer. And failure to answer at all is to answer incorrectly and subjects you to the penalty. I sighed. Fine. What's the penalty? That brought it up short. The penalty? Yes, the penalty. What will happen if I just simply keep walking past? Oh, The now uncertain-looking Sphinx looked over its shoulder. From behind some trees, a loud whisper, "You eat her!" The Sphinx responded, "I told you I'm vegetarian. I can't eat her." A pause, and then I jumped in. How about if I don't answer correctly, I have to teach you a riddle? While there were loud objections coming from the trees behind the Sphinx, it proclaimed, "I like that. I could learn a new riddle. Accepted." Well, that was a penalty I could live with. Okay, what's your riddle? The Sphinx sat even more erect. You drive a cabbage cart. Now note. You drive the cart along the first row of a field and collect 32 cabbages. On the second row, you collect another 17 cabbages. And on the third and last row, you collect another 26 cabbages. Your riddle is, what's the name of the cabbage cart driver? I was about to say how many cabbages had been collected when I realized what the question really was. And potentially what it really, really was. May I ask questions about this riddle? The Sphinx hesitated, then magnanimously allowed me to ask. If the name I say is how the driver is known but isn't the true name, will the answer be accepted? He shook his head. No, it must be the true name. Ah, but anyone knowing my true name could have power over me, so how to answer? I gave it some thought. I looked at Mouse Eye, or where he'd been. He no longer was. I was on my own on this one. Okay. How about the cabbage cart's driver's name is the true name of the witch known as Mistress Sweetwater? The Sphinx just sat there, blinking. It rings of truth. Very well, the witch known as Mistress Sweetwater, you have passed the test. Traveled safely. And he stepped down and headed towards where the other voices had been coming from. As I passed, two much larger sphinxes were huddled around the one who'd posed my riddle. One looked at me. He's learning the ropes and needed some moral and emotional support. It'll be better next time. Oh, goody. I just smiled, headed for home, and hoped this was the last of the day's adventures. I was so ready to kick off my shoes, enjoy a tea, and relax. A few minutes later, Mouse Eye reappeared. I snapped, "Thanks for helping me out there. I could have been Sphinx food." "No, you had it handled from the beginning, but great move to suggest a penalty of your own choosing." I don't know if I believed him at all, but it did feel good to not outwit the Sphinx, but to turn the situation into something that favored me better. Not much later, I finally arrived home. As I stepped onto the grounds, I felt not peace, not serenity. Something was wrong. Of course. As I approached the cottage, I saw sitting on the ground a very unhappy young teen boy. The look he shot me was so similar to the one Sebastian had given. For some reason, this boy needed rescuing. He called out, "Don't come any closer! The bees have gone mad! They'll attack!" "Are you being stung now?" "No, they seem to leave me alone as long as I don't move from where I am right now." The bees, eh? Let me guess. Did you chase a flying hive? He looked absolutely gobsmacked. "How did you know? How could you have known?" And then I saw my wild rose. Trampled. "You chased it, weren't looking where you were going, trampled my flower bed, and then tried to run off without fixing the damage." I swear his jaw dropped so low that he could have easily scooped dirt with his lower lip. The real question here is, are you remorseful? He just nodded. Then what you'll do is walk over to that poor rose and fix it as best you can. That's when his eyes went wide with terror. I don't know anything about fixing dead flowers, miss. I'm sorry, miss. I just want to go home. Well, then you'll learn. Come on. And with that, I walked past where he was sitting to show I wouldn't be stung and headed for my poor wild rose. It looked bad. I wasn't sure if it could have been salvaged, but I was determined to make that young man try. A few seconds later, and watching every direction all at once, he joined me. Still not stung, right? Bees die if they sting you, and they certainly don't want to die on account of a clumsy and thoughtless boy. So here, kneel down. I looked over at him, afraid, panicked, overwhelmed. Close your eyes. Breathe. You're safe here. You didn't mean ill will. Just breathe. To his credit, he did. As he calmed down, and before we moved on to saving unsavable plants, I thought it best to get the niceties out of the way. What's your name? Mick. And where do you live, Mick? Turns out he, along with the rest of his quite large family, work as tanners. While adults would describe it as far off, kids cover ground the way an airship flies. Quickly. Okay, Mick, I want you to re-dig a hole, put in the roots, and while you do that, apologize for your carelessness. I'm so sorry, miss, for... I stopped him. Did you trample me? No, miss. Apologize to what you did trample. He clearly thought I was crazy, but it was what I felt was needed to make it all work out. And with the help of some ominous buzzing behind him, he did as I asked. I'm so sorry, little plant. I hope you'll be healthy again. I heard the sincerity. The wild rose did as well, I think, because we watched it heal itself. It did lose some stem and leaves, but overall it would live and do so happily. I felt a change in his demeanor, though wondering if he'd just been callously humiliated. So I grabbed his wrist before he got up. I'm Mr. Sweetwater, the new witch. This is my cottage, and these are my grounds. You made a mistake, you've made amends, and everything has worked out because you worked to fix your mistake. Now it's time for you to go. I have work to do. I gave him a few minutes before walking to the hive. Thank you for being a part of this place, makers of honey, pollinators of flowers, guardians of the grounds. Thank you. I swear I heard, within the buzzing, something that sounded like an acknowledgement and gratitude. And with that, it was time for this witch to store some reagents, brew some tea, and listen to the music of the night. And that is that episode. And I don't know if you can hear the cat continuing to meow and bang into my stuff and basically be a little bit of a pain, but yeah. So welcome to the Panzer section. Hello. I wanted to use this time to talk about how Alicia and we use the materials and the writing sort of as a way to meet our creative needs, and also as a way to sort of stay accountable and keep ourselves on track. We have a writing week. We write an episode basically every week. It takes us 2 weeks calendar-wise in real life to cover 1 week's activity in Apothecaria, right? 1 episode is the cure week, 1 week is the rest week. And by drawing the cards on a given day each week, it helps to keep us on track with the rest of the writing week. But we both have our writing time, and we have sufficient writing time most of the time in order to then again, to meet up back on Monday and draw new prompts, and off we go again on our crazy adventures, our Madcap adventures. So, so that's typically what we do. So we're typically writing 1 episode per week. However, this is a guideline. This is not a fixed rule. And this is really, really, really important. Because depending on how we're feeling that week, or maybe we've had it busy or stressful or whatever, we can always say, I'm not ready. On the day that we're supposed to pull cards, I'm not ready. So how about if we just not pull cards this week, we pull cards next week, and we just give ourselves an extra full week to do our writing, and then the next week comes around, we pull cards, and then off we go again. So we stay with our schedule, and if there is a week that it just blows up and it doesn't work well for our schedule that week, that is okay, because then we just, no stress. Keep this fun. As soon as you start putting demands on yourself and you're like, oh, I should be writing every day, or I should be this, or I should be that, we call it shoulding on yourself. It is not nice, it is not fun, and it sucks the joy out of things, and there is no quicker way to make sure that you don't do something than to suck the joy and the fun out of it. Especially something that's supposed to be joyful and fun. Okay. And so that is how we keep ourselves writing accountable. And there's different ways to do it. And there is no way that's a wrong way. There's what works for you is what works for you. And taking as much time or as little time as you want in order to write any given episode, any given week, any given season, any given year, it doesn't matter. So long as you're having fun and exploring your particular witch's character and her patience and the surroundings and all that kind of stuff. So long as you're enjoying that, there is no wrong answer. Enough yammering on that topic. So as I am getting ready to close up, let me bring you over to the Drawing Expressions haiku. Drawing Expressions, a creative space, holistically supportive. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for joining me on this little journey, and I hope to see you in 2 weeks' time. Until then, bye for now. Need a little bit more of this. All right, let's try that one again.